Hello, I am happy to have you join the Empower Hour show today. I'm Debbie Sherrick from Inside Out Wellness, and this is the Empower Hour show. And I do this show once a month. I'm a holistic codependency coach working with codependents and emotional eaters in a very holistic way. So you can learn more about me at insideoutwellnesscoach.com. But I love these Empower Hour shows. I'm so happy that I'm able to do these once a month. Sometimes I do them more than once a month because to me it's just a way to sit back, relax, talk about different topics. You can watch from your home, maybe your lunch hour during, some of you might be on your lunch hour right now, or you can watch them at any time after. But I love that it's just a relaxed atmosphere where I can share some things with you about different topics pertaining to recovery, and talk about it holistically and help you understand some of the things that I coach clients about. So today, I'm going to share with you a little bit about why I chose this topic today, that you can't change what you don't confront. I had done a post a couple weeks ago on Facebook with a poster that I made from PicMonkey saying that whatever you need to change, you must confront. And I did a little blog on it talking about how whatever was going on in the energy of the universe right now, that I was seeing this come up with people that I was working with. It was coming up in my life with clients. It was coming up with family members. And I was noticing that clients were having to deal with this right now with bosses, employees, people they're living with, addicts, abuse situations, and that people were, somehow the universe was bringing everything up into people's faces that it was time to confront things. And one of the things that's pretty much universal for those that have codependent behavior is that it's hard for them to confront. It's hard for them to speak their truth. It's hard for them to speak up and ask for what they need for, because of various reasons, and sometimes confronting is a very, very scary thing. Along with the confronting, comes like setting boundaries and things. So it's one of the things that I find that I have to work pretty diligently and really help clients work through and move through to be able to speak up for themselves and confront situations that keep reappearing in their life and keep showing up. And so one of the things we're going to talk about today is your why it's hard for you to confront. So you get to know what your why is, hopefully. Another is we're going to talk about ways that not to confront and healthy ways to confront. I was doing this show today with a Laura Bookbinder who owns Yoga Bliss, and she's also works on recovery of her codependent behaviors. And I asked her to do the show with me today. Probably when you saw the trailer, you saw both of our pictures and wondering, well, where's Laura? And this is one of the topics she was excited about, because this is one of the things she's really had to work hard on. It's been one of her biggest demons, she calls it, is confronting situations and confronting people, because she tends to be more timid and more shy. And so she was going to talk today about the struggle that she's had with confrontation. However, I got a text from her last night that she's not feeling well and she's sick. So rather than reschedule, I had this plan for today and people were planning on watching it, I decided to do this Empower Hour show myself. And actually her and I probably will continue it, because as I was studying for this and doing some notes on it, this could really be a series as we get into, wanting to create change in our life. I mean, how many of us are not wanting to create change in areas? And we could get into change of why we don't confront, why we're not able to make changes, because we're not confronting how we sabotage ourselves with health issues and eating healthy. As a holistic codependency coach, I work holistically, kind of unconventionally, with those in recovery. I work on the emotional, the eating, the nutrition, the spiritual part, and I work a lot with the energy of the chakras and healing codependency behaviors through the chakras, healing our relationship through the chakras. So this topic that we're going to talk about today could really be 3 or 4 Empower Hours. So we'll see how it goes and what we get through today and what we want to continue with. If you are watching this show, not on Google+, but maybe you're watching it on empowerourshow.com/live, and you can go to that anytime and watch it, you know, because these are gone straight to YouTube. So I have a web page where you can go to watch these topics anytime of the day after that. So this particular topic will stay on the empowerourshow.com/live for the next month until the next show comes up, until I redo it. So if you are watching it from there, scroll down, because you can ask questions and comments, and I'll look back at the questions that you have or the comments and interact with you about that, and maybe some of you can interact together. So as we start today talking about you can't expect change without confrontation, the first thing that I really want to talk about before we get in, when we think about confrontation and we're wanting to change, a lot of times we think about confronting others. And we are going to talk today mostly about fears and why we don't confront situations and confront others. And first of all, though, as I was preparing for this, I wanted to bring up that the first thing we have to do is that's so important in confronting is confronting ourselves, confronting our own character defects, confronting our own fears, confronting our own demons or our shadow side, or whatever you want to call that. Because if we're staying in denial and we're continuing to blame other people for things that are happening in our life, and we're not taking responsibility, and we're staying in that victim mode, then it's impossible for us to make change. And if you are someone who is continually doing that, it's very hard for you to take responsibility for your growth and for change in your life. All of us are responsible for our own change. The thing about codependence is that we tend to look on the outside for hope and change and happiness on the inside. And so we might use other people's behaviors, and that they're not doing what we want them to do. They're not treating us the way we think they should be treating us. And so we want to blame and stay victim instead of taking responsibility ourselves to make that change for ourselves. And let me just say this about that also, that if you are someone who tends to blame others for your situation, you tend to blame others for how you're feeling, for your health, for your misery. If you tend to blame constantly your significant other, maybe your addict, maybe your workplace, whatever you're blaming for not being happy in misery, you know, that's really staying in the victim mentality, that victim triangle where we stay victim at the top of the triangle, we persecute others, and then we turn around and rescue because we feel guilty that we persecuted. So if you're someone who stays in that victim mode, just know that it's really impossible for people to make change if they're staying victim, because we're not looking at ourselves. We're not taking responsibility for ourselves. And, you know, I've shared this story many times. When very first time I went to a codependency addiction therapist many years ago, like in my late 20s and early 30s, and I was talking to her about my addict that I was involved with and how I wanted him to change, you know, what I needed to do, what was my part in getting him to change from using and being available. And one of the first things she said to me in love was, well, you know that you're just as sick as he is, right? And that was like so foreign to me. I'm like, well, I'm not an addict. How can I be as sick as him? And then she asked me if I knew what codependency was, and thus began my journey. But I wasn't taking responsibility for my own life and for my own happiness and what I had chosen to be in my life and what I had attracted. So in starting about confrontation today, that's the first thing I felt that I really needed to bring up, that in order to have change, we really first need to confront ourselves and look at what it is within us that is keeping us from moving forward and creating change. You know, I have people that I work with that come to me. I hear this over and over, that they say, you know, I've been to Al-Anon, I've been to Codemeans, I've been to ACOA, I've had sponsors, I've been a therapist, I've been working myself, but I just can't seem, I just don't change. I keep doing the same thing over and over. And when we get into the subconscious and looking at our circle of belief, and that involves, today we're going to be talking about our root chakra, which is where our family of origin comes from. That's our traditional tribe, how we grew up in our childhood. And we created our belief systems really by the age of 7. Somewhere between the ages of 7 and 10, they say our belief systems are pretty much created. And a lot of that energy, I believe, also comes from the womb on up into our childhood. So we have to figure out and realize, what were the false beliefs that I adapted, that I believe in my subconscious from growing up, about relationships, about myself, about my own worth, about my own value, about me being good enough, just as I am. What beliefs did I get or not get in growing up, and how do they show up in my life today? You know, we live mostly by our subconscious, about 90% of our subconscious. So those subconscious are so subtle that we don't even realize how we sabotage our life. So, you know, in wanting to confront and make changes, that root chakra, looking at what is it that I continue to do today, that I create, that I learned when I was little, and I'm proving it to myself that it's truth today in my life, and I'm continually believing it and recreating it in my life today. That's the beginning. And once we realize those things, how's that showing up in my life today? How am I recreating that? Then we can start making changes. We can confront that and make the changes we need. We're also going to be talking today about our throat chakra, which is the energy center that we speak our truth, and where we communicate. And we communicate in love. We communicate our truth. We're able to speak our needs, and we're able to speak our boundaries. And so this is an area that I find energy-wise that a lot of codependents have stagnation in. They may have physical troubles here. They may be always clearing their throat or coughing. That's the physical part. But thyroid issues can also come from not, you know, stagnant energy there, and that just contributes, you know, to the dis-ease in that part of the body. However, this is the energy center where we do speak up, we do confront, we do speak our truth, is our throat chakra. So let's get into talking about creating change and confronting if there is a situation, if there is a person that's in your life right now that there needs to be confrontation about, then let's look at, is that scary for you? Why we need to confront things? What happens if we don't? And get into some of those things. So when we first start thinking about that, we need to realize that confrontation is for you. You're doing it in order to be true to yourself. And, you know, that's the motto of recovery from codependent behavior, is to thine own self be true, therefore you will be false to no man. That's my favorite quote from Shakespeare, because it's so fitting for working with codependents, is that we need to be true to ourselves, and that's the thing that we mostly aren't, is we have a loss of identity, a loss of self, and sometimes we don't even know who we are. So in order to be true to ourselves, we need to be able to confront things when we're needing change. So we have to remember that in the beginning, when we are wanting to confront something, that we're doing it for us. We're doing it because we want to speak our truth. We want to be true to ourselves. Something's bothering us that we're not addressing. It's hurting the cells of our body because we're holding it in. It's causing anxiety. We're walking around in fear and being uncomfortable. We want to confront it. And in doing that, knowing that it's for us, we need to realize and look at, you know, what is our expectation in confronting this situation? What are we hoping for? Are we wanting to change someone? Do we have a high expectation of what's going to happen? if we do confront, if we're confronting someone who is in their addiction, someone who is in denial about abuse, and totally in denial about their self and their behavior, then we have to understand that we're doing this confrontation to bring things out into the open, to bring things out into the light, and not keep them in darkness. And it's our secrets that keep us sick. So we want to bring them out into the light because it's the healthy thing to do. It's called emotional integrity. And we want to have emotional integrity to share our feelings. But we also have to be in reality that if someone is in denial about themselves, we have to be careful that we don't set ourselves up having unrealistic expectations and expecting them to get it and understand and make all these changes. It can happen, but we don't want to set ourselves up for that. So let's look into, in some of the notes that I made for today, about how, a lot of times before we get into recovery and we're wanting to change some of our behaviors, a tool or a behavior, I don't want to say a tool, could have been a tool, but a way that we handled confrontation before we're getting healthier is by avoidance. And once you get some awareness of getting healthier and you're wanting to make changes and move forward, we have to realize that avoidance is no longer something that's a choice for us. We can't continue to avoid things that keep showing up that are bothering us because we know that it hurts us physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So avoidance is something that we don't want to use today. We cannot keep avoiding things. It's going to show up. It's going to come out. No matter what. Somehow it's going to. And sometimes ask yourself this, are you someone that needs a crisis in order for change to appear? If you grew up like that, used to crisis and used to drama, and people didn't confront things, there was that big white elephant in the room all the time that no one talked about. That's the kind of home I grew up in. And so it always was a major crisis that causes a shift. And so sometimes we can get into that familiarity that we don't confront anything, we don't try to take responsibility for things until a crisis happens, and then we're able to make change. And we don't want to wait for a crisis. We want to nip things in the bud and handle things in a more positive, healthy way. So ask yourself these questions when you're wanting to confront someone or a situation. Ask yourself first, what are my motives? What is my motive for wanting to confront this? Is my motive, as I spoke about a minute ago, is my motive to get this person to change? Is my motive to get this person to make me happier so I can feel better? And we're going to get into more of those in a little bit about what your why is, why you don't confront. But you need to ask yourself and be honest with yourself, what is your motive? When I'm working with someone that is getting ready to do a huge confrontation and they're really scared about it because of their whys, various reasons, we go through all of this, making sure they know what are my motives for doing this, what are my expectations for doing this, what am I hoping to create, what's the worst that can happen. So they're able to have all of that out and maybe write all that out and have that all on paper and look at that. I think when people are not used to confrontation and they're really scared about it, and maybe it could be a serious situation, that you really need to have support. You need to have your recovery coach, or you need to have your therapist, you need to have your sponsor, someone really there supporting you because of the backlash that you could be getting, to support and validate you and motivate you and encourage you as you're making this confrontation, you're doing this confrontation. So what are your motives? What are you hoping to accomplish? And what are your expectations with this confrontation? Another thing is to ask, what if I get no reaction? Or what if I don't get the reaction that I want? Can I accept that? And there again, we have to remember that you're being true to yourself. You're confronting the situation because you don't want to not handle it in a healthy way and let it just be pushed under the rug or pretend it's not there. So you're having your emotional integrity, you're bringing truth out, you're speaking your truth. But you may not get what you want. You may not get the reaction you want, or you may not get what you want. And that's when we need to remember, we're bringing it out into the light. You know, someone told me when I was confronting my ex-addict husband a lot, when I saw that he was setting himself up, I could see the signs that he was getting ready to relapse. Of course, way before he did, but I knew the patterns. And when I was directed at the time by my coach to bring that, say, I see that there are patterns that you're doing. You know, maybe you're not going to meetings, you're not calling your sponsor, you're not working your steps, whatever it was. Maybe he was getting more into workaholism and wasn't having balance in his life, showing a lot of anger. You know, there was a lot of red flags. And that she said to me, every time you confront that and bring that out into the light and say, these are the patterns I'm seeing, this is what I'm seeing, these are the fears I have, I just want you to know this is a pattern and not healthy, that I see you're not doing this, or I see you're doing this, and I want to bring it out into the light and talk about it. That every time I did that, it broke the denial. That it always will break the denial for the minute and make them stop and think about that. They may get defensive and get back in denial, but every time you confront something, it does break the denial. And so you're not going along in denial with them. In looking at, I think it's important too, when we are confronting and we're learning about our whys and learning, again, this is going back into our root chakra, excuse me, our family of origin, and looking at what was my belief system that I learned growing up when it came to confrontation and speaking my truth. And for me, my belief system was that my voice didn't matter, that I really wasn't allowed to speak up for myself. Children, you know, my home, we were to be seen, not really heard, about how we were feeling. We weren't taught to share our feelings. We weren't taught to talk about the situation. When there was a crisis in the home, I grew up in an abusive home. So when there was an abuse in the home, the next day, everybody got up and acted like back in their routine and acted normal, and nothing was confronted. There was always that big white elephant in the room that nobody talked about, and that it wasn't safe to share your feelings. If I showed fear, you know, my dad was pretty much about, I think emotions and feelings, I know today, really scared him. At the time, though, I didn't realize that. But if we showed fear, we wanted to talk about our feelings, he would say, you know, Clarks are strong. We don't cry. We don't talk about that. You're not afraid. You shouldn't be afraid. So I was given the message and the belief system that, you know, my needs and my feelings didn't really count and didn't matter. And when there's things going on in the home that need to be addressed, you just sweep them under the rug and you don't talk about them. So as I grew older into relationships, into adulthood, I didn't know how to confront. I was scared to death to confront. Also, my father had a lot of anger and rage, and so when we were scared to death to come to him to ask for things and talk to him about things. We had to really feel him out with timing and his moods and all before we would come, because he would use anger to get his way and to control us. So that was another one of my whys and fears of confrontation, that whoever I confronted was going to turn on me and get angry and attack me. So I would avoid confrontation. So, you know, I had to change those things and work through the fear. I had to walk through the fear, act in spite of the fear, to learn how to confront. And let me tell you, once you start confronting things, once you start confronting situations and doing that and speaking your truth, it gets easier and easier and easier. It gets to where you're uncomfortable if you don't confront it. You can't stand it. You can't not bring it up. You can't not talk about it, because speaking your truth is freedom. You know, there's a verse in the Bible, I think it's in 2 Timothy, that says you will know the truth and the truth will set you free. So when we bring truth out and we speak truth, there's freedom in that. So let's look at how you grew up, and maybe why, some of your whys that you're you know, uncomfortable with confronting today and speaking your truth and bringing things out into the light. Were you allowed to speak up for yourself when you were growing up? Were you given the message that your needs weren't important? And you know, I find that most of us that came from homes of dysfunction, whether it be a addict home, an alcoholic home, an abuse home, a rigid religious home, mental illness home, you know, there's lots of dysfunction, ways of having dysfunction. It's all about how our needs were not met and how it affected us and how it shows up today. So fears of why we don't. So let's look at some of that. Let's look at what are the fears that you have of why you don't confront. Look at your why. Could it be that maybe your why is, if I confront this situation, I have such a fear of losing that person's love that I avoid confronting it because they might withdraw love. And that can be a dance that people do. You know, we have a dance we do in all our relationships, and we need to know what that dance is. I think that should be a Empower Hour show one day, that we should talk about the dance you do with your loved ones. They're like little power plays, or little, you know, one person does something, the other reacts in a certain way, and it's a certain dance, a familiar dance that we do with significant others. And most of the time that dance is unhealthy, and somebody has to start getting healthy and get off the dance floor and change the dance. So if you may have someone that you confront that their way of punishing you or not liking what you spoke up for or confronted about, that they may withhold love. That's their dance. That's the way that they get back at you, is withholding love. And that's so uncomfortable to you. And we need to ask, why is that? Is that something that happened, you know, growing up, that people withhold and took love from me if I didn't behave or act in a certain way? So in knowing our why, once you know your why you don't, that's when you can address it and start working on it and changing that belief system. So it could be that you're afraid of losing love. It could be that you have a huge fear of rejection and abandonment. Again, know your why. Is the reason I don't confront is because I'm so afraid of being rejected and abandoned, because that's what I've gone through all my life. Once we know the why, we can address the why and work through that, where you don't feel being rejected and abandoned anymore, or it doesn't matter so much because you've had so much healing within yourself. You might fear, as I mentioned, anger. Maybe that person, you fear the anger of that person, and you just don't want to, you know, stir up those bees and get stung because that person is really angry. And we're going to talk about, you know, how to handle that in a moment. And that's the way, that's the dance that person did, that person uses anger to control you and what you're confronting and speaking about. Maybe that you are trying, and this can be a big one with codependence too, is that one of the things that we do is take care of people's feelings, take care of people. And we get so worried about hurting their feelings. I know a lot of people that say, I don't confront because, oh, it's just going to hurt his feelings. It takes me back when I think about that when my ex-husband was really deep in his addiction, and I wanted a couple of the family members that were in recovery, I wanted to have an intervention. And his family was so enabling and so into rescuing and caretaking him that their answer was, if we have an intervention, he's going to get so mad at us, it's going to really hurt his feelings, and he's going to get angry. And my response to that was, so what? It might save his life. So there wasn't an intervention, and he did end up overdosing and dying from drugs. But a lot of times that might be the reason. Like, I don't want to confront because it's going to hurt their feelings. If I bring up behaviors they're doing or things that I'm seeing, or I'm setting a boundary and confronting with them, confronting something to them, and it's really going to make them sad and hurt their feelings. And we have to realize that when we are confronting for change, when we're trying to make change in our own life, when we're trying to take care of ourselves, again, to thine own self be true, that we cannot take care of our feelings and someone else's at the same time. It's just impossible sometimes. It's clashes, you know. We can't do it. And we have to realize that when we're being true to ourselves and we're confronting something in love that we really feel that we need to confront, that needs to be brought out into the light, that person's feelings and how they react to that is their problem. They have to know how to work through that. It's not our responsibility to take care of their feelings and help rescue them through what we just said. And a lot of times, codependents will do that. They'll confront something. It'll hurt the other person's feelings. They feel bad that they confronted it. And then they'll try to go rescue the person and say, I'm sorry that I said that, and I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, because they get into the rescuing. So know your why of why you don't confront. Let's look at some signs of why, or situations of why we need to confront. There needs to be, let's say that your needs aren't being met in the relationship, that it's a really one-sided situation. Could be at the workplace, could be at home with kids, with your spouse, with a relationship, with a family member. And then we have to realize, where's the boundary of what I'm looking. But let's say, hypothetically, let's say that you're in a relationship that your needs aren't being met, meaning that that person that you're in relationship with is totally not available. It's a one-sided relationship where you're doing all the giving, you're holding the relationship together, you're the contributor, they're the consumer all the time, and you are getting, your needs aren't being respected at all in this relationship. So that can be a situation where there needs to be confrontation, that you share that and share that needs aren't being met. And that you're unhappy, and that keeps showing up over and over. Another sign that we need to confront is abuse. It can be verbal, emotional, or physical abuse. A lot in relationships, sometimes people will use screaming and rage and verbal anger and verbal abuse to control. They feel safe, maybe, doing that. When people are loud and angry and shouting, they feel a lot more in control than if they're being vulnerable and sharing their truth. So if that's happening, that's something that needs to be addressed if you're being abused in any way like that, and it's ongoing. And in saying that, too, I want to say when we confront something like that, it's important when we confront it and talk about how it's affecting us, how it's making us feel, that it doesn't feel comfortable, doesn't feel good, and it's not okay, and that you deserve to be treated better. When we confront that, we also need to have a personal boundary to go along with that. For example, if you scream and holler and raise your voice at me again like that doesn't feel good and isn't respectful, this is what I'm going to do. And it can be, I'm going to go outside, I'm going to leave the room, I'm going to leave the restaurant, I'm going to detach from you emotionally and physically for a while, I'm going to remove whatever's going on. That's an example, but you need to say, if this continues, this is what I will do, and follow through with that. Not just, you don't want your confrontations to be empty threats, that you're just threatening. Confrontations are not about threatening. They're about bringing that white elephant out into the room, talking about him, not sweeping things under the rug, and bringing things to the forefront. And that's what we're talking about today. And, that's a whole nother, that boundaries, I've done a show on boundaries. That's something else that could have 3 or 4 shows, is boundaries. And how do we set boundaries? If the same things keep happening over and over, there's no change. That's a sign we need to confront something. That insanity thing, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. If things continue, there's a cycle of things continuing to happen over and over and over and over, and they don't feel good and it's not healthy, then that's a sign that something needs to be confronted. If there's addiction in a home, or addiction with someone that you love, and you're sensing addiction, you're sensing that someone's using, or going down a path. It could be, I was talking to someone last week, working with someone where there is a fear of suicide. And so those are the things that's a sign. Those things need to be confronted. Those things need to be brought out into the light. When you see someone harming themselves in some way that you know is unhealthy and you fear for them, that's something that needs to be confronted. You know, not only someone harming you that needs to be confronted, but if you see someone harming themselves and you love them, to be able to go to them and confront them and say, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm seeing, and this is what I fear, and I just wanted to talk to you about it because I love you enough to talk to you about this. Red flags. Look for the red flags. You know, one of the things that I really encourage and teach, and those of you who have worked with me know that when I talk about the solar plexus right here, this is your empowerment center, this is your feeling center, this is the place that codependents don't pay attention to. You know, we don't follow our GPS. Our emotions are our GPS center. We stay so much in our head thinking and analyzing and going over and over and rethinking and telling our story about things that we don't get down in here and say, well, how does that make me feel? So if there's a red flag can be, you know, if something doesn't feel good to you continually inside, there's behavior, there's things going on in your life that don't feel good, there's that check inside. We need to pay attention to that feeling center. You know, our intuition, our third eye, our discernment center, our intuition can be sharpened. Intuitively, this does not feel good. I need to confront this situation. Now, let's talk a minute, and I'm going to have a sip of water because I've been talking so much. Let's talk a little bit in the end of our time here that we have about how things not to do, how not to confront, and then maybe talk about some healthy ways of confronting. One that we don't want to do, and this might be a pattern that you have that we want to look at and break, is don't wait until you're so angry already that you get yourself so angry before you confront something, that you've waited and waited because maybe you're already anticipating that they're not going to get it if you bring it up, they're going to do this, they're going to say this, they're not going to listen, and you're already anticipating a fight with them in your head, that you end up going into the confrontation already angry and anticipating that fight, that when you go in to confront, you're demanding instead of confronting. And you're demanding your voice, your tone, because you've got yourself all worked up, already angry, that it's just not going to work out. So, and you're not asking which triggers a power play. You're triggering a power play that doesn't exist except maybe in your own head and in your own mind. That you've gone over and over in this in your head so much, you've gotten yourself so worked up about it that before you even go to the confrontation, you've already got yourself picturing yourself in a fight and in an argument with this person. And I had to, last night when I told my husband that Laura wasn't going to be able to be on today, I said, honey, do you want to come on the show with me and talk about confrontation? Because this is something he's had to really work hard on because of how he grew up and wasn't heard at all, really, growing up. In his childhood, he felt that he really just hates confrontation. And, you know, I have found that most men do. It's a lot easier for women to confront things because we're a lot more relational. That's just the way God made us. It's easier for us to talk about. We want to talk about it. We want to bring it out in the light. We want to confront things. It's a lot easier for women, I find. And you know, it takes really, really a strong, self-confident, secure, healthy man that says, oh, yeah, I confront things right away. You don't see that a lot. It's just not in their nature, really, to talk about things like us women do. So, you know, him and I talked about it, that one of his employees a couple months ago was showing some behaviors that were not okay. And my husband, loves this kid and really liked him and just did not want to confront it and was dreading it and all. And so we kept talking about it, that finally, something awful or, happened that was like a crisis thing with the company, with the work, that it ended up, the confrontation had to be something of anger and getting into it. Then they had to go back and apologize and that. But it was a good example, and we talked about that, about when we see things that need to be confronted, how important it is to nip them in the bud in the beginning before we get ourselves so worked up and going to the negative, anticipating that it's going to be a train wreck before we even get into it. Because, what we think and feel always match, and what we are thinking and picturing, visualizing, that law of attraction. So we want to watch the reasons and the excuses we're using of why we don't confront. Avoid being passive-aggressive. Maybe you might hint about something that you don't like, but you're really not communicating clearly, and then you're expecting them to assume that they know. So that's not confrontation. We don't want to be passive-aggressive and make little hints or little sarcasms about things we want to bring out to the light. Another thing is that we don't believe we deserve it. We don't think we're worthy of our needs or our wants, and so we avoid it. And then because we avoided it, because we really don't feel we deserve it, and then we complain that we don't get it. And again, that's going into that victim. One I wanted to bring out about is, because of our technology today, is doing it with a text or email because of fear. I think one of the worst things today to do, and people get into it, is confronting through a text. You can read a text, and I know many of you had that happen, where a text can just read wrong. You can read a wrong tone into it, and it's really, it's really being afraid to confront it. Pick up the phone and call the person, at least talk to them in person. I think talking to someone in person is the best. And email, if that person lives away, talking on the phone, emailing maybe back and forth can be okay, but a lot of things can get construed in emailing and texting. And it's a way that we can avoid confrontation. You don't want to get into defending and debating when you are confronting something, because then you've lost it. You've lost the whole point of it. If you're confronting and bringing something out and that person's wanting to defend themselves and argue about it, and you get into a defend back and forth about why you feel the way you feel, you just need to share your feelings and bring the situation out in love and light, not attacking the person, talking about how you're feeling, what you're seeing, that it's about you, and not get into the debate and defend, because that's just a dance and a circle that has nobody wins when you get into that. We can confront people that aren't alive too. I wanted to bring that up because some people say, well, I wish I could have confronted my dad. I wish I could have confronted my mother, about certain things, and, or my abuser. And we can do that. There's certain ways that you can confront. In role playing, I'll do that with people. Writing letters. I went something that I wanted to talk to my mom about and confront about. That I was working through years ago, and I went to her grave, and I talked to her about that, and I confronted it. And to me, that's something I needed to do for myself, to feel like, to have closure on that. So if we think, well, I can't confront that because they're gone. Yes, we can. Remember, it's for us. It's about us bringing it out, sticking up for ourselves, being true to ourselves, taking care of ourselves, and having closure on it, and being able to cut the cords there and say goodbye to that. Don't blame, attack, take responsibility. When we're confronting someone, we don't want to get into blaming them, attacking them. You've lost it when you start doing that. We want to take responsibility as our adult responsible, a responsible adult, and talk about why this is bothering us, how it's making us feel. We can talk about behaviors, but we don't want to attack and blame the other person, because then we're just getting them riled, and of course they're going to want to start a fight with you. Are you too defensive and sensitive to feel you need to that you feel you need to confront everything. Some people just wear their feelings on their sleeve, and they're so sensitive. Their feelings get hurt. Everything's about them. They take everything personal, and they feel they need to confront everything. That's something too. You know, pick your battles. Things that are reoccurring, things that are really unhealthy and harmful. But if it's just small personality quirks that we can learn to detach from, you know, we want to watch that we're not super sensitive, taking everything everybody says and everything everybody does personal. What are your deal breakers? Know what your deal breakers are in your relationships. Know what your deal breakers are in your home, in your situation. What are your needs? What's valid? You know, I have many you know, drugs are a deal breaker, infidelity is a deal breaker, verbal emotional abuse is a deal breaker. You know, those are deal breakers. When it comes to somebody maybe not acting the way I think they should, and maybe I'm trying to look to them so I can create happiness. If you would act a certain way, then I would feel better. You know, that's being codependent. Those are looking to other people for our happiness. So you want to know what your deal breakers are. If something is really hurting you and harming you and not healthy for you, and someone's not treating you with respect, whatever that is, then those are the things that we need to confront. And remember that it's not about controlling another person. When we are confronting, it's not about we're trying to control them and change them and get them to get it. It's about us speaking our truth and confronting something. It's not about trying to get someone to see things the way you want them to see it. Not everybody sees things our way. People always are at their own level of awareness on their path of where they are. They are at their reality and at their truth at this time. So trying to constantly get them to get it and get them to see it our way doesn't work. They're in their own. However, you know, as I said before, you want to confront with that if somebody's using or something or abusing. You want to break the denial and keep talking and bringing that up, that it's not okay. Our biggest barrier in not confronting is repressed emotions. So we want to deal with the anger. We want to deal with the resentment. Don't wait till you're mad to confront. If you've got a lot of anger, you've got a lot of resentment, work through that. Get to a place of peace. The more we love ourselves, the easier it is to not be defensive with others and to confront. Now, right now, I want to share that something that I don't like calling confronting. If someone's really having trouble saying, I just hate to confront, I hate confronting, another name that I like to call it is carefronting. Because confronting sometimes sounds negative, that you're confronting someone, you know, oh God, some people just can't stand the word. So I say, what about carefronting? That I care enough, I love myself enough, I care about the other person enough that I'm going to carefront this situation. And sometimes when we think of it that way, it can be easier for us to bring things out because we're caring enough to bring it to the forefront. So how do we learn to confront? Well, how do we start is practice. We practice carefronting. You know, it's not about waiting till we feel like it, because a lot of times we won't ever feel like it. We just, you know, avoid and we're afraid, but we have to practice. And there's so many ways, you know, to just practice it a little bit at a time. We can practice it with, like I said, a coach or a therapist. We can practice. I had a client who talked into her phone to record her carefronting and what she was going to say to see how it sounded back to her and her tone. So, you know, we can write in journals, but there's no other way around but to just practice it and then get that support. I remember the first time that I confronted, and I know I've shared this in one of the shows, my very first confrontation I feel that was so scary to me is when I, many years ago, confronted my father. Coming here, I was married, had just moved into my house. I had 2 little kids at the time, and my dad was continually coming here to visit to see the kids, but he would be drunk. And I did not want him coming here drunk. I grew up with that, and I didn't want his grandchildren to remember Grandpa drunk all the time. So I decided that I needed to confront that. And I did it in love. I knew exactly what his reaction was going to be, but I had to put that aside. That's when I learned you can't take care of someone else's feelings and there's yours at the same time. So I said in love that, you know, he could come visit anytime he wanted. He could come see his grandchildren. However, I did not have a choice growing up of seeing my daddy drunk. And today, this is my home, and I do have a choice. So please come as often as you want, but come sober. And of course, he reacted to that. He didn't talk to me for a long time. He said, you know, his piece and said some shaming things, whatever, and he left. And this was many, many years ago. But I'll tell you, after he decided to talk to me again, he never came to my home drunk again to see his grandchildren. And I can remember when I was doing it, my palms were sweating, my heart was beating out of my chest. I was so afraid to do it. But once I did it, even though he was mad at me, I can't tell you how empowered I felt. And my self-esteem and my self-love just bloomed and blossomed because I stood up for my truth and I stood up for myself and I spoke for myself, and I set a boundary with my dad, which was the scariest person in the whole world for me to confront and set a boundary with. So, you know, then it just started getting easier and easier. Change is going to happen. We can't control that. There's always going to be change. Our fear is the emotion. Now think about this. Your fear that you have, that's the emotion of fear, where manipulation and control comes in. So I like to do this little practice where you just sit with your fear and worry for about 15 minutes. Just feel it. Because the harder you try to make yourself feel an emotion, something, the harder it is to feel it. If you sit and say, okay, for 15 minutes, I'm going to feel all the fear, and I'm going to feel everything so scary and everything I'm worrying about, I'm going to feel it right now for 15 minutes. It's really hard to make yourself feel that. So the harder it is, it's a therapeutic technique. And it's an excellent way to break through resistance. And you can use it for anxiety, you can use it for worry, and with fear. So sit, feel that for 15 minutes as much as you can. Let it go, breathe deeply, and ask God to speak through you. You know, I never do confront without having, or front with a lot of prayer about it. I pray for God to give me the words. I pray for him to speak through me. I love that verse, God made the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart to be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength. So I want to pray that before and say, just speak through me and what I need to say in confronting this. Know who you're confronting. And if they're not going to have any level of awareness, if they're going to be blind to it, they're not healthy at all, they're an angry person, then know that and watch your expectations and know it's about you speaking your truth and standing up for yourself and setting a boundary and so on. It's about you, not the other person. And of course you want to have, if you're confronting someone and there's abuse where you think that person's going to punch you or something or slap you, of course that's a whole different situation. We're not asking you to confront this. You might want to do an intervention with that person where there's confrontation. You might want to have family members with you, but don't set yourself up in a situation where you're going to confront and get abused physically because you're confronting something. That's where we use wisdom. It does need to be confronted, but we need to use wisdom in how we do that. You know, it's not difficult to know what approach might start a war and what approach can bring peace. We need to use wisdom with that when we're confronting and stop and think. And as I said, we can't take care of someone else's feelings. I can't reiterate that enough. And ours at the same time. We need to think about what we're going to say, how we're going to do it, what we will do once we confront it, know what our expectations are, have support in doing it. You will recognize your fears and rejection and your people-pleasing before you confront. Are we carefronting? We need to know, are we carefronting to control the person, to change them, to manipulate, or are we carefronting to express how we feel and bring that's been hidden in darkness, not talked about, out into the light where it can be dealt with? I had a situation last week, a couple weeks, that I had to confront that I kept dreading it, you know. it was with a family member. And I knew, I had this vision of this boil, this infected boil that needed to be lanced. And, any of you who've ever seen anyone who experienced a boil, it won't heal. All the infection's just in there. It will not heal unless it's lanced. And so healing can begin. A lot of times, and I want to give you that hope and encouragement today, that I have found that healing precedes confrontation. When you bring something out into the light, it can be dealt with then. God can deal with it. When things are hidden in darkness and not talked about, it's hard to deal with them. So sometimes we have to cause this confrontation. We have to do this, bring it out in the light. They may not like it. It may cause a little bit of a crisis, whatever the situation, but we brought it out. Then the solution can be dealt with, and there can be healing, and can look on, okay, I've confronted this, now what do we do about it? Now what can happen with it? Don't, as I talk about feeling your emotions, don't babble on and on and on defending what you're saying. Be to the point and direct with love. Codependents do that a lot. They will go on and babble and babble and babble, on and on and on and on and on, talking about why they're confronting something and defending themselves. And over-explaining themselves. We don't need to do that. We just need to be to the point in love. This is what I feel. This is what's not comfortable to me. This is what I'm seeing, and I wanted to address it. Timing is everything in confronting, and so is our tone. Sometimes we can talk quiet, but have a really angry, mean tone. And timing, we don't want to confront somebody when they're, at the end of the day, maybe home from work and tired and in a bad mood. We don't want to wake somebody up in the night and say, I need to confront you about this, when they're half asleep. So we need to use timing and ask them, maybe, can we talk about something? There's something I'm going to address. When's a good time for you? And worry about the time, or think about the timing. We need to practice verbal non-resistance. This is so important about verbal non-resistance. If people accuse us of something that we didn't do, or they think we did, that they see it in a different light, and they attack us, our nature is to be defensive. So we want to practice, this is a great tool, we want to practice non-resistance. It makes the mountain disappear when we practice non-resistance. It doesn't mean we don't speak our truth if we need to, if need be, at another time, but we'll be guided to do that at a later time if need be. But we need to ask, why do we feel the need to defend ourselves all the time? If someone's saying something that's not true, or someone's attacking us, that's something we need to look at. If we are constantly in verbal defense about ourselves, what is it that person said that we're believing about ourselves? Are we believing what they said? Do we believe some of that to be true? If we've come from feeling not good enough and shame, then sometimes that will raise its ugly head, that we're feeling not good enough, so we have to verbally defend ourselves. So practicing non-defensive verbal resistance and not talking about it, not defending yourself, is a great tool to use, and ask yourself why you're doing that. The more we say the hard stuff to others, the easier it becomes, and we need to easier to express our truth about ourselves and being true to ourselves. Again, to thine own self be true. When we talk about the throat chakra and that energy there, this is where also, like, speaking to our spiritual guide, speaking to God, helps open up that throat chakra, staying in prayer. I love the essential oil peppermint for the throat, and we can put it on our tongue. We can put it, rub it on our throat here. Doing some yoga exercises, where we throw our head back and we open that throat center. The color is blue, and just picturing it wide open in that beautiful blue color going through there. And practice talking to others. Practice sharing what you want to confront. I've been reading through the book of Proverbs this month. And, Proverbs teaches us how to relate and get along with man. Psalms teaches us how to have a relationship and get along with God. But I love, Proverbs is such a great book of wisdom that's so applicable for everyday life. And I was looking up at a couple of scriptures in there that Solomon wrote. And one of them that I like is that a gentle answer turns away wrath, but harsh words stir up anger. So when we're confronting, we want to remember gentle answers as we're responding, that the harsher we are, the more it stirs up anger. I think that's pretty good wisdom. There's another one in Matthew that says, if your brother or sister are treating you poorly and sinning against you, go to them and point out their fault just between the two of you first. And if they listen, you have won a friend or won a brother. And if they don't, then go and get the elders or get others and come in front. And to me, that's like have an intervention. You know, if things aren't changing, things are bad, and there needs to be an intervention, go get others. So we have a lot of wisdom also from God. And that's where our goal is, that we want to live in higher consciousness, in our higher divine self, rather than these lower energies down here where we have our past, our relationship to others that harmed us, our relationship to self, and we want to live up here speaking our truth in our intuition, our discernment, our connection to our source energy, to God, living in our higher self, and learning how to do that every day and taking care of ourselves spiritually, emotionally, and physically. So thank you so much again for joining. There's a lot of information today, and as I said, we could go on and on about confrontation. So I just want to thank you for joining me today, and you can watch this particular show at any time. You can also, if you are on Facebook and we're not friends, you can Facebook me, because I have some closed women's groups for empowerment and codependency. And also check out my website, InsideOutWellnessCoach.com, and look at some of the things and blogs that I have there. And have a great rest of the Tuesday. Namaste.